0 to 3, the National Center for Infants, Toddlers, and Families, and on the Professional Advisory Board of the Johnson & Johnson Pediatric Institute, among many other things. I could not give a list of all the different things that Dr. Lieberman has done. She was born and raised in Paraguay. She received her BA from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem and PhD from Johns Hopkins. Dr. Lieberman is trilingual, tricultural Jewish Latina. This background informs her work on behalf of children and families from diverse ethnic and cultural origins, with primary emphasis on the experiences of Latinos in the United States. Currently, Dr. Lieberman is the director of the Early Trauma Treatment Network, which is a collaborative of 4 university sites that include UCSF, Boston Medical Center, yay, Louisiana State, and Tulane, and funded by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, better known as SAMHSA, and part of the National Child Traumatic Stress Network. If you want to know more about the National Child Traumatic Stress Network, talk to me or various people around the room. Her major interests include infant mental health, disorders of attachment, early trauma treatment outcome research, and mental health service disparities for underserved and minority children and families. Her current research involves treatment outcome evaluation of the efficacy of child-parent psychotherapy, which she's going to tell you a little bit about, not today, with trauma-exposed children aged birth to 6 and with pregnant women involved in domestic violence. So, Alicia, are you here?
I am here. Can you see me?
Okay, hold on. We're working on it.
Okay.
There you are. Okay.
Thank you. And is my slide showing?
Yes.
Great. I wish I were there in person. I have worked with Dr. Paris for many years. She is inspirational, and it would be wonderful to be there together. But I hope that we can bridge the geographic distance with our shared commitment to immigrant children and their families. The reason for the title of my talk is that I wanted to reflect the contradictions in how the United States feels and acts towards immigrants. On the one hand, we are a nation of immigrants, and the US would be a very different country without us. The US has been a symbol of hope and opportunity for millions and millions of people who have chosen the US as their destination from all over the world for several centuries. On the other hand, exclusionary laws and anti-immigrant attitudes and actions have been an integral part of the country's history, with very concrete repercussions at the national and personal levels. Today, I hope to offer a point of view and some examples from our own work, including our collaboration with the International Rescue Committee, to talk about how each of us in our own roles can deepen our empathy to inform our actions on behalf of young immigrant children and their families, and create strategies that increase their sense of belonging. Feeling that we belong to a whole that is greater than our individual selves is a building block for mental health, both in children and adults. And the more we promote it for everybody, the healthier we'll be and as a nation. I want to start, let's see, I want to start with a quick overview of reality and myth in the American dream. On one hand, there are enormous contributions that immigrants are making that are inextricably embedded in every aspect of the culture, from the food on our tables, given that 75% of farm workers are responsible for bringing food to our tables by being farm workers, and about half of them have documentation and half of them don't. Through every level, media and communications industry, food service and food processing, 40% of home health aides and 45% of private household workers, 16% of nurses, and we know that there is a tremendous national shortage of nurses, and 20% of physicians and surgeons, with higher representation in rural areas and areas without medical care, and in areas of medicine that are underrepresented, so they make an enormous contribution. On the other hand, we have the stresses that color every minute of the immigrant experience, from having to learn a new language to learning to navigate U.S. institutions that are unfamiliar, medical, school, financial, to different social customs and expectations, and sometimes a different hierarchy of cultural values, collective, communal priorities versus the more individualistic attitudes in the United States. And these first four are part and parcel of the immigrant experience, regardless of the level of hardship that accompanies the experience. But there is also the emotional burden of a dysfunctional immigration system, a dysfunctional, broken asylum system, and fear of deportation for hundreds of thousands of families that have to tolerate that burden while navigating the regular stressors of being an immigrant. And we have to remember that immigrants have very diverse profiles. We are a large percentage, first and second generation immigrants are a large percentage of the population. 25% of children under age 18 have immigrant parents, and the experiences range widely. When I came to the US in 1971, I had a predictable path to citizenship and no fear of deportation. When a very close relative arrived in 2001, she spent years of uncertainty and occasional panic as she negotiated the arbitrariness of the immigration system. And this anxiety affected all of us, including the babies that she had in the US. Asylum seekers, refugees, unaccompanied minors, people are seeking U and T visas, and undocumented migrants with no path towards citizenship are exponentially exposed to multiplicity of factors, including traumatic stressors that completely alter the experience of an immigrant who does not have those fears. And we need to take into account the perilous road to get here. The scarcity of food, water, shelter, material resources, the violence in many forms, the exploitation, the unsafe transportation means, the treacherous terrain, the accidents and untreated medical conditions that happen on the way, and of course, the immoral family separation that has happened and continues to happen at the border. And the Homeland website says that in 2022, the US-Mexico border was the deadliest land route for migrants worldwide, with hundreds of deaths and disappearances just in that 1 year. We have to highlight the unspeakable cruelty of separating children at the border, and the fact that they continue to have repercussions And I just want to highlight two statements. One by given at the congressional testimony by Alta Stewart, the American Psychiatric Society president, saying that children separated at the border amounts to state-sanctioned child abuse, and another statement in the New England Journal of Medicine saying that there is no room for ambiguity about child separation, and that in the United States, the only reason that we should separate children from their families is the risk of harm from maltreatment. And yet it continues to happen. I'll give the example of 40-year-old Antonio, his father, and his mother. We had the privilege of providing child-parent psychotherapy to this family soon after Antonio and his father arrived in San Francisco, and the mother joined them 4 months later. The family had fled Guatemala after being forced out of their home at gunpoint by a gang that said that their apartment was now the gang's. And they had people in their family who had already been killed by members of the same gang. So they knew that they meant business. And they spent 4 months walking to the United States border, only to be detained by Border Patrol agents at the border. And while the father and Antonio escaped and were able to get into the United States, the mother was apprehended and could only rejoin the family after 5 months. During Antonio's separation from his mother, he exhibited many symptoms of anxiety, anger, and post-traumatic stress. He kept asking, why did we leave mommy? Where is she? What happened to her? What is happening to her? And after they reunited, he had harmful beliefs and revenge fantasies, including loss of trust in his parents' ability to protect him. And he kept saying, Papi and I are bad. Mama is weak. The police are bad. I need a gun to kill the bad guys. And uncertainty about who to trust and who not to trust. Who is good? Is this one good? Is this one bad? As they walk down the street. And the parents, much as they tried to explain why it happened, the fact that they did not want it to happen, the separation, how they came here to seek a better life, and sometimes it couldn't happen the way they wanted it. They experienced a great deal of marital stress, mutual blame, guilt, anger, and helplessness. And the rest of my talk, I want to reflect on Antonio's experience as a symbol of, as an expression of the normative developmental fears and anxieties that all children experience in the first 5 years that are exacerbated by separation and by trauma. We know that the normative experiences of the first 5 years of life are fear of separation, which starts at about 8 months and increases and then declines towards the second year of life, fear of losing love, fear of being hurt in the body, and fear of there is something wrong with me. I am bad. I don't deserve to belong in society. And these are adaptive fears, adaptive responses to anger. Adaptive responses to danger, because fear of separation gives the signals, I need to be with you in order to be safe. And the parents then respond by being with the child while crossing the street, when approaching a stranger, when there is an impending source of danger. Fear of losing love, trying to gain the approval of the parents, is a way that the child learns the social mores of the society. It's like, I want to please you so that you love me, and I worry that if I do bad things, you will not love me anymore, and you will not approve of me. Fear of body damage starts when the child starts crawling and being autonomous in their mobility. And so it really protects from recklessness, so that the child checks with the parent to see whether it's safe to move away and turns to the parent when they are hurt so that the parent can provide care. And the fear of being bad, the fear that there is something in us that might make us be rejected by society, is the origin of a moral conscience, is what serves as an incentive to distinguish right from wrong and choose right. And the difference between fear and anxiety is that fear is the immediate response to danger that is in the moment and concrete. And anxiety is the anticipation that the danger will recur. The more safety we can provide to children in response to fear, the less likely it is that the child will develop intense and crippling anticipatory anxieties that the danger will come back again. And this is what happens with children who have gone through traumatic migration, that the fear of the moment, the clear and immediate danger, becomes internalized as an anticipation that it can happen all over again. I want to start with the fear of separation and loss, which is the fear that makes the child ask, will you come back if I can't see you? And these fears live in the body. It's for young children in particular, like a child like Antonio, it's hard to know why separation happened. So that Antonio would ask himself, why did we leave mommy? Why did she go away? What can we do to get her back? Why isn't she back? And in regular circumstances, parents assuage the fear of separation by playing peekaboo, which is, see, I went away for a while, but I come back, hide and seek, saying goodbye, I will see you soon again, and when I see you, we will play and I will put you to bed, whatever it is. Giving safe substitutes, the transitional objects, a cuddly object that the child can hold on to that might have the parent's smell, for example. Living with safe substitutes and have mindful reunions. I'm so happy I'm seeing you again. In the months of uncertainty for Antonio and his father about whether the mother would come back, the father did his best to serve as a secure base, but he could not promise that the mother would come back. And even when he tried, Antonio could not believe him because she was not coming back. And children have a very short time span, so they cannot wait too long for the promised things to happen. The fear of losing love and approval is the child's effort to understand that even when we're angry with somebody, we can still love them. For children in the first 5 years of life, the fear that anger means losing love is very real. And the experience of Antonio was that when his father lost patience, said, I told you already, I don't know when your mother will come back. Or when the father disciplined him For him, it was a real fear that now his father might leave him, that now his father might stop loving him. Fear of body damage, which is a fear that, as I said, starts when the child becomes mobile, is a fear that in regular circumstances gets met with little rituals. In Spanish, it's sana sana colita de rana, or it's kissing the boo-boo. In the United States, it manifests itself in children, for example, not wanting to have their hair cut or their nails cut or their nose cleaned or even being toilet trained. And these universal healing rituals are very helpful in consoling the child and saying, see, it's all gone now. Let's put a nice little band-aid on your boo-boo. When the hurt is a hurt that cannot be cured, or when the injuries that happen during the difficult journey are very painful, the regular rituals don't work, and in the case of Antonio, it was manifested, the sequelae of that was manifested in his fear that any little backache, any little headache, any little stomachache was a reminder that any time now they might go back to a dangerous journey, or they could get hurt without anybody helping them. And finally, the fear of being bad was manifested in Antonio in, it's my fault, we ran away and we needed to take her with us. She couldn't run so far. My daddy is bad. I am bad. My mommy is weak. And asking all the time, who's good? Who's bad? Now, in expectable circumstances, parents have caregiving roles, protective roles that protect from danger, respond to the child's physical needs, socialize the child into what is acceptable behavior, what is unacceptable behavior, help understand reality for the child. I cannot give you that teddy bear behind the store because it's too expensive. We don't have the money, or the store is closed. So that the child understands why things happen the way they happen through the parent's explanation. And at the same time, parents give children a sense that life is valuable and that there are worthy values. When the parent is frightened, when the parent is in despair, when the parent is hopeless, it's very hard to give children a sense that life is meaningful and valuable and joyful. And there is a sense of losing their competence in parenting. I could not protect my child. I could not respond to the physical needs. I could not respond to their emotional needs. I could not give my child an explanation of why things happen the way they happen. So that each of these functions is vulnerable to stress and trauma, and parents experience helplessness, shame, and guilt when they cannot protect their children from danger and meet their needs. And very often, we respond with anger when we feel helpless. Anger is a response very often to a sense of, this is too much for me. This is too much for me. And then there is an anger at oneself that gets projected on anger at others. And of course, when the child sees the parent's anger, they immediately blame themselves for having caused it and think that there is something wrong with them as a result. So the challenges of trauma and separation are immediately manifested in changes in the child-parent relationship, so that one thing that we know is that the immediate response to danger is fighting when we think that we can prevail over a source of danger. We fight back, or we flee, which is what Antonio and his father did in response to the border patrol, but the mother was not able to do, or we freeze in place, trying to be as small as possible so that the foe is not going to see us or will think that we are dead and we're not worth dealing with. These external responses, the immediate behaviors of fighting, fleeing, or freezing become internalized when there is chronic danger. And people become reactive, angry, aggressive, or avoidant, shy, self-effacing, or avoid feeling. Try to live out emotions, and as they live out emotions, they also live out the emotion of love and care and vulnerability that are really the fuel for healthy relationships. And they start making attributions to each other, like Antonio saying, Mama is weak, Daddy is bad, I am bad. And the parents in turn thought that Antonio had been damaged for life, that the experience had really made him into a child that was alternatively angry and aggressive and scared when he said, and aggressive when he said, I want to kill the police, I want a gun to kill all the bad guys. They were really scared that he would become a criminal. And so there are attributions that the parent and child make to each other that can become internalized and affect the quality of family relationships in a chronic way. We have to understand and remember that even though diagnosis of mental health problems should never be used as a label, it is useful to remember that children can develop PTSD even in the first year of life. We just published an article showing how 3-month-olds, 5-month-olds, 6-month-olds manifest traumatic reactions after a traumatic response. And it's a way, the diagnosis is really a way of organizing our observations of children so that we can think more clearly about how to intervene in a way that rescues them from that psychological distress. Children can experience PTSD. They can also experience what's called complicated grief disorder of infancy and early childhood, which is what happens when a child has been separated for a long time with no hope of reunion, as in the case of death, but also in the case of prolonged separation with no promise of reunion. And in those cases, there is crying and searching, and there is also something that looks like forgetting. On YouTube, there is a very dramatic video of a little 2-year-old who was reunited with the mother after many months of separation, and he ran away from her. He did not recognize her, supposedly, except that he recognized his father and he recognized his grandma, he recognized everybody else. But the anger and fear about losing the mother was so intense that he could not afford to reconnect with her and run away. And in response, the mother burst into tears and said, my baby, soy tu mamá, Lo hice por ti, mi amor. I did it for you, my love. Which was coming here before him and then having him follow. But the child did not know the reason, and so he really responded with a complicated grief disorder of infancy and early childhood. So, given this picture, given the damaging impact of traumatic migration, of separation at the border, given that our children are waiting, what can we do? That is, Dr. Paris talked about the National Traumatic Stress Network, and I'm giving it as an example of responding by creating resources. The International Rescue Committee is a resource. The institute that is putting this wonderful event and does so much for children in Boston is another resource, is creating resources that are a secure base where immigrant families can come for the resources that they need. And among the resources are products that we can create that can help parents helping their children and can also be used by people who work with immigrant families. One example is a book called You Weren't With Me, Cuando No Estabas Conmigo, which was written by Chandra Ghosh Ipen and illustrated by her husband, Eric Ipen. That is a wonderful course that parents can read to their children about what separation does to children and their families. And it starts by saying that what we can do is open the door for emotion, for talking about what happened, so that there is a big rabbit and a little rabbit, and the big rabbit says, you probably felt confused, scared, hurt, sad, angry. You probably felt so alone and said, I am very sorry and very sad that this happened. I wasn't with you and you didn't understand why. And this opens the dialogue between Big Rabbit and Little Rabbit. I want to know what you did. I want to know what happened. I want to know if bad or scary things happened to you. I want to give you all the hugs and kisses that I couldn't give you then. And this is what we call in child-parent psychotherapy speaking the unspeakable. It means creating a safe space for dialogue, to address painful events, to really talk about what happened, to convey the message that there is no stigma to what happened, that it is nobody's fault in the family, that we can talk about what happened to us and how we felt as a response, and helping parents and helping children understand the connections between what happened to them and the anger, the sadness, the reactivity that they are experiencing. And once we give permission or open the door to speaking the unspeakable, letting them follow their own rhythm in how they want to continue the dialogue. This is what we call the child-parent psychotherapy triangle, where on the left-hand side of the triangle, there is the experience. What happened? In the case of Little Rabbit, you weren't there. You left me. And in the right side of the experience, it's sometimes I am very mad. I don't understand why you weren't with me. Or body damage, my tummy hurts, or I don't trust you, I feel scared, fear of losing love, will you love me? Will you leave me? And of course, I worry that you will go away again. The anticipatory anxiety that happens when something bad has happened and we're afraid that it will be repeated. In addition to resources, we also need to engage in flexible, attuned interventions that involve trainings and educational resources for attorneys, case managers, family navigators, shelter personnel working with children and families on the border. We need on-site psychological first aid, emotional support, bearing witness, and providing coping mechanisms. And of course, as in child-parent psychotherapy, we need trauma-informed mental health interventions for children and families. And this is what we are doing in my program, Child Trauma Research Program, but also what many other programs are doing throughout the country. I want to give an example of how to use the principles of trauma-informed care, trauma-informed mental health interventions so that they can be used in the community. Because we know that only a small percentage of children and families that need treatment are going to be able to receive it. There is an enormous scarcity of mental health providers, and particularly mental health providers from communities of color, from immigrant communities. There is an enormous scarcity of therapists who speak the language of the refugees, of the asylum seekers, of the immigrants that need help. And so what we've done is take the principles of child-parent psychotherapy, of trauma-informed care, and create forms of intervention for groups of parents. One form of intervention is called attachment vitamins. This is the intervention that we're doing with the International Rescue Committee, which has been translated to about 20 languages from all over the world. And attachment vitamins is a program that helps parents learn about the principles of attachment, what causes stress in children and parents, what causes trauma in children and parents, and what are healing responses between the parent and the child. And one example that is very moving is a mom from a country where the child rearing practices were such that parents did not articulate love for their children. They showed love through caring, through protection, through providing food, all the everyday care, but they did not say, "I love you." And this mom was taking her child to school and saw other parents say, "I love you, bye-bye." And she came to her group and said, why do parents say, "I love you"? It feels so artificial to me. And then the coordinator for attachment vitamins for this group intervention explained to her that when one says "I love you" to a child, it's a way of reminding the child of something that puts bridges between the part of the brain that uses language and the part of the brain that feels the love in the body. And that those bridges are very helpful bridges so that the child can remind herself of the love at times when the parent is not there to provide the immediate, concrete manifestations of love. And the mother said, "Now I understand." And she started saying, "I love you" to her child. And for this child in particular, it was so important because she had gone through very difficult migration experiences that had shattered her conviction that she could count on the mother's love, and the articulation of that love restored that trust. This slide that you have here, Lazos Familiares, is another group intervention that was created by Vilma Reyes from my program and Monica Noriega also from my program. And it is Lazos Familiares. It's a little different from attachment vitamins in the sense that it involves the entire family. Attachment vitamins is a group for parents coming together to talk with each other. Lazos Familiares is a program that brings families together for meals that are dinners that bring the family together around a table where each family sits in their own table, but all the families are immigrant families that have gone through a traumatic migration. And it's a 7-week group program that is based on child-parent psychotherapy and attachment-based strategies and uses the book, Cuando no estabas conmigo, you were not with me, to help families share their feelings about their separation. They sit around the table, they have dinner together, and it's very important. One component of the treatment, of the intervention, is that the people doing the intervention make sure that the table is beautifully set, like for a festive occasion. And they put flowers, they put a lovely tablecloth, they put nice silverware, nice dishes, and nice food. And very often this is the only time that the family sits together at the table. And particularly one interesting thing is that when there are young children and teenagers, the teenagers often are so alienated that they don't want to sit with the family. They want to sit with other teenagers. But by repeating it again and again, they start sitting with the family. And the young children and the parents and the teenagers get a new sense of belonging. And the family reads, Cuando no estabas conmigo, when you were not with me, and then they draw their own version of the book, so that on the left-hand side you see Cuando no estabas conmigo, the book, and on the right-hand side you see a parent and a child doing it together and showing, I was sad, I was angry, my tummy hurt. And they also come together after dinner to work to draw a family of their journey, using rocks to symbolize the hardships and using flowers to symbolize who helped them along the way. And on the last session, the families work together to plant traditional herbs in a beautiful container that they then take home with them and water and nurture as a symbol of their regrowth. So the strategies are weaving together narratives of trauma and narratives of protection, because talking about what happened helps heal, and creating safety in relationships is the building block for healthy love and healthy learning, and repairing after a break is really the best hope that we can have, because we're always breaking, we're all broken, and we all need to keep repairing. so that we, each one of us, can support the repair. I also want to say that there are limits to mental health approaches to social problems and that we all need to be activists in addition to interveners to change systems, to try to fix the broken systems for the underserved, for the immigrants, for the poor. And in the process, we have to remember that as we help others, we are often seeing things that we can't unsee, and hearing things that we can't unsee. Diane Elmore Bourbon, who is the NCTSN Policy Program Director, said, when speaking with key stakeholders in the immigrant system, I continue to hear them report that these children are among the most traumatized that they have seen. Once it's there, it is really impossible to unsee. And so we need to come together and create communities where we help each other to protect ourselves from vicarious trauma and from burnout. And we also need to remember that we can take small breaks to prevent the accumulation of stress, notice our dysregulated feeling and give a name to it. I am feeling hopeless, I am feeling angry, I am feeling alone, and engage in self-care that engages our kindness towards ourselves and rely on each other. I remember once when I was very stressed about a family situation, I was talking to my relative's caregiver and feeling like I was not doing enough. And she said to me, compassion that doesn't include ourselves is not complete. And I keep remembering that in moments of hopelessness to give myself the energy and the hope to continue the work. Thank you very much.
Wow. Thank you so much, Dr. Lieberman, for that amazing talk. I'm going to bring the panelists up now, and we're going to hear a little bit from them, and then we're going to open it up for other questions and thoughts. And I'm going to do a quick introduction so you know who people are. And they can also say a little bit more about themselves if they want to. But in that beautiful red top over there is Carmen Rosa Naroña. And she's an infant mental health clinician originally from Ecuador, whose work is focused on understanding the impact of historical trauma, displacement, and colonization in young children in minoritized families and the providers serving them, and implementing interventions tailored to their unique strengths, needs, and sociocultural, historical, racial context. She's also a BUSSW alum, if I can say that, and spends a lot of time down the street at Boston Medical Center. Child Trauma Clinical Services and Training Lead, Child Witness to Violence Project, Boston Medical Center, and Assistant Professor of Pediatrics. Sitting to Carmen Rosa's left is Anat Weisenfreund, and Anat has worked in leadership roles with high-risk infants, caregivers, and practitioners in diverse settings for over 30 years. She directs Community Action Pioneer Valley's Head Start and early learning programs in Western Massachusetts, and is the current president of the Massachusetts Association for Infant Mental Health. And if you're interested in knowing about the Massachusetts Association for Infant Mental Health, or MassAIM, I'm sure Anat will be glad to tell you about it. And the person, and also that lovely colored top, is Danielle de la Fuente. And her passion for peace building stems from working at embassies and the U.S. Department of Defense, which led her to create Amal Alliance, an NGO that provides displaced and disenfranchised children worldwide with social development programs that help children cope with adverse experiences and provide the learning fundamentals needed to succeed. Another BU alum. So each of our panelists is going to share about 5 minutes of reaction, thoughts, local example, and then we will open up to thoughts and questions. Dr. Lieberman, you're still hearing us, yes?
Yes, very much so. Thank
Terrific.
you. I'm
Thank you.
happy to be here.
Is there any particular order? First of all, buenas noches, Alicia.
Buenas noches. ¿Qué tal? ¿Cómo te va? Gusto verte.
Gracias. So there is so much to say, and I feel so honored to be here tonight. It's so honored that Dr. Lieberman trained me, and Patricia Van Horn trained me as a child parent psychotherapy clinician, and that I have been training others in CPP. But most importantly, we have been able to implement child parent psychotherapy at our program at the Child Witness to Violence Project. And the inspiration also that we received from CPP has helped us to create a center that is dedicated to infant and early childhood mental health for immigrant children and their families. And I think that my comments are going to be connected to the clinical aspects of our work, particularly at Child Witness, and how with CPP, I have been able, in my experience, and I can talk only about working with mostly undocumented women who had very young children, and that sometimes we were reunified with their children here, or they experienced a separation at the border, and how the child parent psychotherapy helped and has continued to help to keep us hopeful. And I think that when Alicia was talking about the normative fears, and also the fear of being bad, one of the aspects that we target in our treatment is the internalization of the badness, not only on the children, but in the parents. Being undocumented is not only extremely stressful, but it carries a lot of shame. And as Alicia was saying, children and adults internalize many or very much of the negative rhetoric about them. So as part of the work, it is important to externalize that and also to help them think about the systems of oppression and how these systems of oppression have often since, the era of the colonization in their own countries, as a way of giving meaning of the bravery that involved coming here, fighting for their lives and the lives of their children. So then we can begin to heal, right? So then also the children are not, or they know how to respond when the child is rejecting parts of themselves or rejecting aspects of the parent or showing anger. And the other piece is about the fear of a separation. We often say that the border is at our hospital, that the border is at our classrooms, that the border is in the clinical environment, because those families, not only the families are bringing the impact of the immigration trauma, but then also we know that with an unsolved immigration policy system and with so many threats present, they are carrying that fear with them. And often the biggest fear that they talk about is the fear of being detained and deported. So we have created a tool, is a family separation plan, where we spend a lot of time with the parents thinking about possible people who could take care of their children, and so they can have a sense of agency there, but then also how to talk about, have these difficult conversations in a developmentally appropriate way with the children. So that is one aspect of how CPP continues to inspire our work, that we might not have a solution for immigration policy, but we are creating a safe space to particularly address these two aspects that I just mentioned. And then the other aspect that we have focused is on workforce development. As Alicia was saying, there is a scarcity of providers of color. And that is not unusual because you are feeling it in your skin. Even if you are an immigrant with many privileges like me, the stories touch me in a very, very personal way. So how we can create protections for the workforce. And I am thinking about attachment vitamins and the other intervention created by our colleague Vilma, that they have a lot of flexibility, and that can help us as providers to feel more capable of intervening, that not because, in my case, I am an immigrant or a person of color, I know what to do. So I cannot emphasize the importance of training, reflective supervision, and then also the duty that organizations have to protect us. And I'm going to stop there, and thank you.
Thank you so much. Carmen Rosa, who also joins me on the board of the Massachusetts Association for Infant Mental Health. So it's nice to be here with you and you, Danielle. And thank you to Dr. Paris, Ruth, and Dr. Castro, Dina. It's really an honor for me to be here. And what a moment, right, we find ourselves in. I mean, this is the timing of this event is really very stimulating, and you know, an honor to be here with Dr. Lieberman, who I have learned so much from, unbeknownst to her. And I want to thank you again, even though I can't see you right now. I think that you know, your analysis and explanation of typical development and the normative and adaptive fears of the first years of life is so, so important to understanding everything else that's layered on top of it, right? And we always start from a place of strength, and we start from a place of understanding normal development so we can help people, right? And we can empathize and be there. And I have to say, you know, in preparation for tonight and thinking this moment that we're in politically in our country is so very frightening and so very important. And I have to say that as an immigrant myself, it has me thinking back in time. It has me thinking about my grandparents who left Austria under life-threatening circumstances to escape the Nazis, who found themselves in Russia, and then again at the end of the war with their 2 children came back to Austria when they were 10 and 11, and then I myself, when my mother died when I was 10, came to this country, right? So there is immigration, and every person's story is different. But there are themes. There are themes. So, but I am here to talk a little bit about a resource that I think is very, very important, and that's Head Start and Early Head Start programs. And as Ruth said, for the last 15 or 16 years, I lose count, right? I've been running a Early Head Start and Head Start program in Western Massachusetts, and I really love what Head Start brings and how closely aligned it is with everything we know about infant and early childhood mental health and relationships and putting parents first, right, as a way to create a nest in which children can grow with their parents and others. So Head Start and Early Head Start serve children birth to 5 and pregnant people, pregnant women. And we do not require proof of citizenship to enroll families. We are obligated to enroll the neediest families first based on community assessment and priority scores. And in our program, we do prioritize refugees and immigrants. In our program in Western Massachusetts, almost 20% of all the children we serve are either refugees and immigrants with 38 countries of origin and over 20 languages spoken. So we serve the whole range of pregnant women and their families up to age 5, and the family's priorities really are our guide. We work to reach and meet families in their own language through multiple modalities, through staff who speak their language, through translated materials, through interpreters, and most recently, through a wonderful tool called the Talking Points app, where we can, some of you are shaking your heads and you may know it, right? Where I can text a family who speaks Urdu in English and it'll translate in Urdu and they text me back in Urdu and I see it in English, and it's been a game changer in our program. And by the way, the reason we have this app was because it was suggested by one of our parents, right? That's how deep parent involvement is in our program. We try to listen and to learn. What is your priority? What do you need? And so Head Start wraps around in this multi-generational ways. We provide educational services, right? But we also help parents and families meet basic needs. You know, in infant, early childhood mental health, we think of Head Start and early Head Start as prevention and promotion, but if that's not an intervention, I don't know what is. Right? So we understand in Head Start how important the earliest experiences are. We understand the centrality of relationships. We understand the parallel process inherent in all relationships. We understand that culture is foundational to caregiving beliefs and values. We understand that our programs are really holding environments for children and families. And with that, our responsibilities to train and support our own reflective capacities. So there's so much more I could say, right? But I think I want to end with a conversation I had a few days ago with one of our preschool teachers, who I'll call Aaliyah, who immigrated here when she was 10 years old, right around 9/11. And she's from Pakistan, and she's Muslim. And we had a really wonderful conversation, and I told her I thought she should be here at this panel, actually, and maybe she can be at some point. But we talked about some of these themes, and she said, you know, there's trauma, right? There's loss. There's this terrible disorientation that immigrants feel when they come to a new place. There is the negotiation, both outside and inside. But she said, you know, I draw such strength from being an immigrant because I tell myself, I survived my past. My future will be better. We talked about how the previous remembered survivals are mined every day as sources of strength. I have survived so much, everything pales in comparison.
Good evening, everyone. I also want to send my appreciation to our hosts and my esteemed panelists for the wonderful work that you're doing. And Dr. Lieberman, I think you set an amazing foundation to what we're discussing and how all of what we're doing collectively really addresses the problem that we're facing now. And so Dr. Lieberman spoke about creating resources, you know, specifically trauma-informed resources and opening up the floor for emotions so that children can learn how to express themselves and, you know, discuss some of the trauma that they're endured either through their journey or in their new location. So I wanted to speak a little bit about the work that we're doing, both globally, but also locally, of how these are practical applications of taking these concepts that might seem a little bit intimidating and what that looks like on the ground. So for those of you that don't know me, I run Amal Alliance. We're an international NGO. We work in 6 countries: Lebanon, Turkey, Uganda, Bangladesh, Greece, and now the US. And we're most known for serving children that live in refugee camps, shelters, some of the most dire circumstances you can imagine. I've heard all sorts of horror stories of children that they've endured and their trajectories, and I won't take time telling those now. But these children oftentimes arrive at these new locations without their families. A lot of them are unaccompanied minors. They've endured horrors. I mean, trauma that most adults shouldn't even have to face, much less, a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old. And now they're in a new and unfamiliar setting, and they don't speak the language, and they don't understand the culture, and everything's new and scary. So what we offer are social and emotional learning interventions that really teach children to, one, how to identify your emotions. What are you feeling? But then once you can identify, maybe you're sad or angry or frustrated, that's fine. How do you manage that emotion? And how does that in turn affect others around you? So we teach empathy and compassion and teamwork and goal setting, so really that these things start building on each other so that children can reestablish trust, which is so important because they've lost that in their journey, but most importantly, start rebuilding safe, secure attachments in their new location with the people that are surrounding them. So our most, I guess, famous program is called Colors of Kindness. And it's a multi-award winning program. It's evidence-based. So it's not just, I think it's a good idea. We have research. And we were super excited because we partnered with Neighborhood Villages and Horizons, as well as the Massachusetts Department of Early Education and Care, to bring our curriculum to Massachusetts. So specifically to children living in shelters, ages 0 to 5. And we serve predominantly Haitian families, also Central American families living across the shelter system. So these are a mixture of new arrivals, but also families that have been here for a longer time. Many families also experiencing homelessness, although a vast majority are immigrant families. And so we took it upon ourselves to convert 2 school buses into classrooms. And so we've turned this into magical spaces. They're really beautiful. I wish I could show them to you because they're really just out of this world. And so the idea is that these classrooms, these schools, come to the children directly. And so, Monday they'll go one shelter, Tuesday another. And what we're offering on our buses, the Colery Place Space Express is the name, predominantly is our Colors of Kindness program. So children ages 3 to 6 will receive our Colors of Kindness program over the span of 10 weeks or within 10 consecutive days, depending what shelters we're serving. And obviously families are on the move, so we want to make sure that they can really get advantage of the full intervention. It's all trauma informed. It's been vetted by psychologists and social workers and parents and families. We work with the communities themselves because we want to make sure that, we're not using a one-size-all-fits approach, because something that might have worked in Uganda and Bangladesh might not work in Massachusetts. But we really want to make sure that these are adapted to the families that we serve so that they really get the most benefit. And we have these very cute little blobs. So the children receive the instruction and they see these little, they're like little colorful characters, but we call them blobs. And so they really start identifying with these characters like, Mabu brings a breath of fresh air and it teaches mindfulness. And we have Windy Woo and she has a magic hat. And in her magic hat, she has all these fabulous yoga poses so that you can mix movement with your breath. And so we use everything from art therapy to dance to, I feel like I'm forgetting something, but it's all play-based approaches. So we also serve the 0 to 3. So our partners bring in parent and child groups, so we can kind of instill some basic parenting, but also just tips on, how to take care of themselves. Because at the end of the day, we really are modeling behavior through our teachers and our caregivers. And it's like the airplane. If you don't put on your mask first, you can't put on someone else's mask. And so we invest heavily in the training of our staff, our caregivers, to make sure that their well-being is good so that they're modeling that behavior and what we're trying to teach to the children. So if you see really fun, colorful buses with a jingle, now you know where they came from. They're kind of in the Marlborough, Westboro, Shrewsbury area at the moment, and we're hoping to expand this. And I'll end there, but I think what's most important, I think, is the fact that this is a major problem, right? We have so many kids that really have survived horrors, and they deserve the right to learn and to play and to thrive and just reach their full potential. And if we didn't have so many different types of interventions and players and key stakeholders working together, it becomes very siloed. And so the fact that we have conversations like this where we can share and learn from each other is so important, because, now we know that they're doing the Head Start program nearby, and we have clinical specialization, and I think it's really that collective work that we all do together that's the power in really addressing issues. So I invite everyone to help us build brighter futures for every child, and I think together we can make an impact.
Wow. Okay. So I'm going to open it up and I will take questions. And if you can, I'll point to you and then you can stand up, hopefully. So Dr. Lieberman can hear us. I think we're pretty well. Oh, yeah, that would be good. So I don't have to stand over here. Yes, yes, yes. So you stay there. Yes. Okay. Over there.
Hello. So I came from New Mexico, and I worked extensively with migrant families after they were unified with their children again from the border. And so we housed, what happened was in all the shelters in Texas and in Arizona were full. And so we kind of build a shelter in a hotel. There was a couple of hotels and then a church. And so we were able to house over 300 families that were reunified with their children. CBP treated them really awful. When we would wait for the buses to meet the families, some of the families didn't have shoes. They didn't have clothes. There was one girl who had her arm was broken, and she didn't get medical attention there. And so we worked really hard to provide safety for them, knowing that this was a place that they were going to stay 1 or 2 days before they were transported elsewhere. And so a lot of them had court dates in El Paso, so they still had to show up. And so we were trying to move their court to another place in the United States, wherever they had family. And so my question for Carmen is, how do you, when you work with these families, understanding that some of them may have temporary protection status, knowing that some of them do have a court date where they have to present themselves to immigration to try to fight for their refugee status for their case, knowing that sometimes the rejection rate was as high as 90%, how do you foster a sense of trust with the family so the families can trust you, knowing that their stay in the United States might be temporary?
Thank you for that question. It's a very important question. I think that I have the privilege of working at Boston Medical Center, used to be Boston City Hospital. So it is a referent for many people, for many immigrants. And many of the families who come to see us come because someone has said, go to Boston Medical Center, go to pediatrics. The doctors are great. Everybody is great. And it's a safe place in that way. However, there is a lot of fear, of course, for all the reasons that you are mentioning. So from the first moment, even when someone calls, we are consistently giving the message that we won't share your information, anything. We will go really out of our way to protect you and your child as much as possible. Even, in our work with medical residents and with residents, we have it created ways of helping them or helping everyone thinking about how do you document on the charts or in Epic. And I have some of my colleagues here so they can in pediatrics, so they can chime in if they wish. But that is a big one of the biggest questions, and then I think that in terms of if they need, I'm thinking about a recent case where there was a notice for an appearance to court, so we mobilized, or rather my colleagues mobilized very quickly to get support from Maya to present all the paperwork. So we don't work in isolation, and that is one of the biggest aspects of this work that Dr. Lieberman also mentioned, that is interdisciplinary work, that is that also sometimes you do have to work around the margins and look for communities of providers who work with immigrant families because they know about the resources. So it is so there are a number of ways in which you can access information, and then also know our limitations, that we really need to know where we are referring families, and that if we are not sure about a resource, we don't send families there. But in the case of this family, for instance, it was very important that they appear to court. If they had lost that that hearing, it would have compromised all of their possibilities of acquiring status. It is very frightening, so we also make sure that they go with someone. So what I am saying is that there are a lot of unpredictables, but number one, we try to ensure that their information is safe with us, that we are not going to report them to the immigration authorities, that our hospital is a safe place that is protected. And then also in terms of referrals, we are very careful, and we don't make promises that we cannot uphold, right? That we are very clear about that. And one of the discussions is about, if there is a separation, how can you have control of where your child will go? Does that answer this?
Thank you, Carmen Rosa. Another question for any panelist, or I think Dr. Lieberman's still with us too. So if you have a question.
Hi, this question is maybe, well, really any of you will probably have your own perspectives on it, but I was wondering right now, with the status of the shelter systems in Massachusetts and the expected, the system is just is in flux right now, and there are a lot of questions that are unanswered on how we'll be able to respond to families who are in really unstable conditions, given the limits in time in certain shelters. How are you working to prepare for that crisis, or honestly respond to the crisis now? Just knowing that families are needing to choose between two very difficult options in terms of their housing.
I'm happy to take this one if you guys want.
Right, let me solve this problem. It's so I tried to get a little bit of data about how many families there are with children under 5 in emergency assistance shelters in Massachusetts right now. We don't have very good data to begin with, but what we do, we think that there are about between 5,000 and 6,000 children under 5 residing right now in emergency assistance shelters. And the resources that are available for these families, even right now, are woefully inadequate. I know in my part of the world, there was just an article in the Boston Globe a couple of days ago about West Springfield and immigrant children there and families, and community resources are stretched very, very thin. There are very significant language barriers. In terms of Head Start, one thing I didn't say because it's just so depressing is that I know for our program, we're only funded to serve about 1 out of every 12 eligible children. And that is true across the entire country. We have 29 or 30 Head Start programs in Massachusetts right now. Many of them all over the state are working to help immigrant families, but there is not the space and there's not the funding. And I'm struggling to find something positive, but it really is a crisis. And maybe you have something more helpful to say. I don't
I'll add
know.
a positive note. I 100% agree with everything she said, and it is a crisis. But I have seen a lot of really wonderful organizations and actors on the ground kind of come forth and be very flexible and dynamic in the way they're delivering interventions. And I think that's critical because at a time of uncertainty, things change from one day to the next. So, for example, we had designed our bus program to be 10 weeks. That's impossible because at this point, we're not really seeing families there staying for 10 weeks. So we immediately had to change our form of delivery. We had an amazing mobile team on the ground that said, okay, well, let's, switch to 10 consecutive days, or let's do afternoon classes versus morning. And I think it's seeing those people that really care, and the practitioners and the people in the field, because that's really what's going to make whatever is already there be leveraged in a more powerful way.
And perhaps we can end, because we're going to come to the end of time, although I think people will be around, to end with what Dr. Lieberman offered to us, is that we can only do so much through services and mental health, and that we need to be activists as well.
Yeah.
And so we need to address this at a different level. And I sort of would probably leave you with that. Dina's coming. Ooh. Dr. Lieberman, do you want to say something?
Vote.
Yes.
Well, just a way of closing, just want to thank everyone for this opportunity. First of all, thank you, Dr. Lieberman, for agreeing to join us today, to our panel of our esteemed colleagues here that are working in the community, doing so much work, and to all of you who are committed. You're here because you're interested in this topic, you're interested in young children and their families and immigrant families. And I know that wherever you are contributing, your little bit, if we, to support these children and families. The Institute for Early Childhood Wellbeing is also committed to do this work, as you've seen, and we hope to be able to put together some of the resources and make them available also to the community. Thank you very much. I'm Dina Castro, Director of the Institute for Early Childhood Wellbeing, and on behalf of all my colleagues, we thank you for being here.
Thank you, Alicia, so much. It was
Great
wonderful to
listening.
see you. Maybe
I learned
some point
so
in person.
much. I learned so much.